All right, let's do this. Get ready, because we're going deep into the world of etiquette. I know, I know, you might be thinking etiquette, seriously, but trust me, this is going to be way more interesting than you think. We're using Etiquette for Dummies as our guide for this deep dive, and let me tell you, there are some real surprises in here.
Yeah, it's really cool how this book takes something we might think of as, outdated and makes it relevant again. Like it's this toolkit for building better relationships no matter what year it is.
It's definitely not just about like which fork to use at a fancy dinner party,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. The book really gets to the heart of it, saying that etiquette is about making other people feel comfortable and, building those genuine connections. The best part, it actually leads to like more personal fulfillment for you.
So it's like a win-win situation. You're being considerate of others, and it makes you feel good too.
Precisely. And here's something that really stood out to me. It actually says that good manners, they never go out of style.
Haha, that's so true. Unlike some of the questionable fashion choices we made back in the day.
Right. So while trends come and go, good manners are timeless.
I love that. So how does the book sort of break down this whole etiquette thing?
Well, it boils it down to one super simple but really powerful idea. Treat others as you'd like to be treated.
Yeah, it's so basic, but it's amazing how often we forget about that.
I know, right? It's like the golden rule for pretty much everything.
All right, so let's say you're meeting someone for the first time. First impressions, they're huge E. What's the book have to say about that?
Okay, so get this. The book says you don't have a lot of time to make a good first impression. It cites this study that found people form their opinions about you in, like, the first 4 minutes of meeting you. And get this, 80% of that impression is based on how you act, not what you say.
Wow, so it's all about body language, right?
Exactly. So while, the clothes you wear do matter, the book actually says that good posture and, just a confident demeanor, those are even more important.
That makes sense. Like you can have the perfect outfit, but if you're slouching and not making eye contact, it's not going to work, right?
You got it. And about clothing, the book does have some specific advice on what not to wear to work.
Oh, this I gotta hear. What are we talking about?
It basically says to avoid anything, too extreme or revealing. Like, think about what shows respect for the workplace.
Got it. Nothing that would make grandma blush.
Exactly. It's all about that balance, looking professional but feeling confident too.
Okay, so first impressions, check. But what about those relationships that are already established? Like with family and friends. Does the book talk about that?
Oh, absolutely. It starts with family etiquette, and honestly, this part was a wake-up call for me. It basically says to treat your family members with the same respect you would give, like, honored guests.
Interesting. I think it's easy to, like, take our family for granted sometimes.
Totally. We forget that even little things, those small acts of courtesy, can make a huge difference.
So what kind of specific things does the book recommend?
Well, it says to make sure you're saying please and thank you. Just being considerate of each other's privacy and really listening when someone is talking.
Those are good reminders. It's like remembering to be as nice to your family as you are to, like, your coworkers.
Right. And it points out that being polite at home, well, it creates a much more, harmonious environment for everybody.
It sets a good example for everyone, I guess.
Exactly. And for friendships, the book really focuses on being kind and supportive.
Like celebrating each other's successes, offering comfort when things are rough, just being a good listener. Those are all part of it, right?
Absolutely. It's about showing up for your friends no matter what's going on.
Anything else about friendship etiquette that jumped out at you?
Yeah, actually. The book's section on gossip, it really emphasizes how important it is to think before you speak, especially if it's something negative about another person.
It's easy to get caught up in gossip, but it can really hurt someone's reputation.
Exactly. And it reminds us that words have power, We got to use them responsibly, especially when it comes to our friends.
Okay, so we've talked about, how we present ourselves, how we interact with people in person. But these days, communication goes way beyond face-to-face interactions. So what about things like, emails, letters, online stuff? What does the book say about etiquette for those things?
Oh, that's a great point. It actually has this whole section dedicated to communication etiquette. It talks about everything from like writing a thank you note to, navigating online communication.
Okay, this is where it gets interesting. I mean, communication can be so tricky these days. What are some of the big takeaways you got from that section?
Well, it stresses that it's important to be clear, but also courteous no matter how you're communicating. Whether you're writing an email, sending a text, even just talking on the phone, it's all about conveying your message in a way that's respectful and easy to understand.
So, like, no more rambling voicemails
Yeah.
or cryptic texts.
Nope. And it has some great tips for specific situations. Like for emails, it reminds you to actually use the subject line effectively, so the person knows what the email is about right away.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm definitely guilty of sending those vague subject lines.
It happens. And it also cautions against overusing acronyms or jargon, especially if you're not sure if the person on the other end will understand them.
Right. Sometimes those emails feel like you need a decoder ring to figure them out.
Totally. What about traditional letter writing? Does it get into that at all?
It does. And you won't believe this. It even gets into what kind of stationery you should use. Apparently, using ruled or lined paper for a personal letter is a big no-no. Really. I never knew that.
Yeah, see? There are all these hidden rules we don't even know about.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. But I got to ask about something that I think makes a lot of people nervous. And me too, dining etiquette.
Oh, yeah. Napkins, forks, all those tricky foods. It can be a bit daunting.
Okay, so what are some of the absolute essentials I need to know so I don't, totally embarrass myself at my next dinner party?
Well, first things first, the napkin. The book breaks down, when to put it on your lap, how to use it, and even where it goes at the end of the meal.
It's crazy how much etiquette there is around a simple napkin.
I know, right? And then there's the whole world of, formal table settings.
Oh boy, this is the part I always get nervous about. Where do all the forks and spoons and knives go?
Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it seems. The book has these diagrams, and they show you exactly where everything goes. Utensils, glasses, plates. It even talks about the differences between, American and European dining styles.
Wait, there are different styles.
Yeah, like the way you hold your fork and knife,
Yeah.
even the order the food comes out.
So if I ever go to a fancy dinner party in Europe, I'm going to need to do some serious studying.
Definitely. And speaking of studying up, the book also has a section on how to eat tricky foods.
Ooh, like what? Give me some examples.
Think artichokes, snails, even spaghetti. Things that can get a little messy if you don't know the proper way to eat them.
Okay, that section I definitely need to read. I had a few spaghetti mishaps in my time. Okay, now let's talk about another thing that can be intimidating: wine. Choosing the right wine, especially at a restaurant, it feels like a minefield.
Absolutely. There's the type of wine, the vintage, the price. It can be overwhelming.
So how does the book make wine less scary?
Well, it gives a general rule of thumb. When you're at a restaurant, spend about as much on the bottle of wine as you would on your food.
That's actually really helpful. Gives me a starting point, at least.
Right. And here's something I learned that kind of blew my mind. Most restaurants mark up their wine prices like crazy. Sometimes they double or triple the cost and then add $10 on top of that.
Oh, no wonder my wine bills are always so high.
Right. And the book doesn't stop there. It explains the different types of wine glasses and how the shape of the glass actually matters.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah, but it makes sense. The shape affects the aroma and the taste.
It's all about the experience, I guess. Okay, so we've talked about being a guest at a dinner party. But what about when WE are the hosts?
Well, the book says it's important to have a good mix of guests, people who will, kind of complement each other.
Oh, so it's not just about inviting everyone you know. It's more about, being strategic about the guest list.
Exactly. Like you're putting together a puzzle.
I like that. What else does it say about being a good host?
It says to think about your guests' schedules,
Yeah.
especially if you're having something on a weeknight.
Yeah, nobody wants to be out late on a Wednesday when they have to work in the morning.
Right. And it also talks about how to handle the whole kids situation.
Oh, that's a tough one. How do you decide whether kids are invited or not?
The book says to be super clear on the invitation, like in the way you word it. For example, if you don't want kids there, address it to Mr. and Mrs. Smith instead of the Smith family.
That's clever. Clear communication is key.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all part of being a thoughtful host.
All right, I feel like I'm getting better at this hosting thing already. So let's talk about the flip side, being a good guest. What does the book say about that?
Okay, so one of the first things it stresses is being on time. And this might surprise you. It says that showing up too early is just as bad as being late.
Whoa, really? I always thought it was better to be early than late.
Well, the book says that if you show up too early, it can put the host in an awkward spot, especially if they're still getting ready. It's better to arrive within the time frame they give you.
Okay, yeah, I get that. What if you absolutely have to be early, though?
It actually has a tip for that. It says to offer to help the host with any last-minute stuff.
That's a great idea, turning a potentially awkward situation into something helpful.
Exactly. And beyond just punctuality, the book also talks about good conversation topics for parties.
Oh, here's where I need help. What are some good things to talk about that won't accidentally offend anyone?
It suggests sticking to things like, travel, hobbies, current events, but try to avoid anything too controversial, of course. And careers are always a good topic.
So basically anything that's light and positive.
Probably. Keep it pleasant and engaging for everyone.
And of course, no negative comments about the party itself, the food, or other guests.
Definitely not. Even if you're not crazy about something, just be polite and discreet. It's all about being a gracious guest.
Right. It's about being positive and appreciating the host's efforts. Okay, now let's talk about something that always makes me second guess myself. Gift giving.
Oh yeah, gift giving can be tricky.
What does the book have to say about choosing the right present?
Well, the main thing is thoughtfulness. It's not about giving something you like, but something the other person will really appreciate.
So like thinking about what they would enjoy.
Right. And it also says the presentation matters. Even if the gift is simple, taking the time to wrap it nicely shows you care.
I love that. It's like that extra touch that makes it special.
Exactly. And speaking of special gifts, it mentions charitable donations,
Yeah.
giving to a charity in someone's name. That's a great idea for people who already seem to have everything.
Oh, that's a really thoughtful option. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Okay, before we move on, I have to ask about the section on special situations, those potentially awkward moments that we all encounter sometimes.
Ah, yes. Life throws us those curveballs.
What kind of special situations does it cover?
It covers so much. Baby showers, funerals, weddings, even travel. It's got it all.
Wow, it's like a guide to navigating life's ups and downs with grace.
Exactly.
All right, let's start with baby showers. What tips does it have for those?
One really helpful tip is to put information about gift registries on the invitations. That way people know exactly what to get.
Yeah, that makes it so much easier. No more guessing what the parents-to-be need.
Right. And then it goes from happy events like that to, more serious things like funerals or visiting someone who's sick.
Oh yeah, those are always tough situations. What does it say about those?
The book says the most important thing is just being there and offering support. It's not about, making big gestures or giving speeches. It's about being present and offering comfort.
Yeah, that's so true. Sometimes just showing up is the best thing you can do.
Exactly. It's about showing compassion, even when you're not sure what to say.
Okay, let's talk weddings. There's so much etiquette surrounding weddings.
I know, right? It's the big day.
Everything from invitations to gifts, seating arrangements, speeches, it can feel overwhelming. What did you learn from that section of the book?
Well, one thing it points out is that wedding traditions, they're always evolving. The roles parents play, who pays for what, even invitation and gift etiquette, it's all changing. It's really about, finding what works for each couple.
That's so true. It's about making the day about them, not about some outdated rules.
Right. And it tells this really interesting story about where the whole tradition of giving cash gifts at weddings came from.
Ooh, tell me.
Well, apparently it comes from this old custom where the bride's family would throw this huge party, and it would leave them with almost no money to actually help their daughter start her new life.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Right. So the guests would figure out how much the party cost per person and then give that amount as a cash gift to help the couple get started.
It really puts a whole new spin on the idea of a wedding gift.
It does. And the book also gets into, some of the tougher situations like divorced parents at weddings and the etiquette of second weddings.
Oh, good. Those situations can be really tricky.
I know. And the book gives some really practical and sensitive advice on how to handle them.
Okay, let's shift gears and talk about travel. Traveling can be a big etiquette test.
Oh, yeah. Especially when you're in a new place with different customs and all.
Exactly. So what does the book say about being a good traveler?
It really emphasizes that good manners are even more important when you're a guest in another country, It's about being respectful of the local customs and traditions, like trying to blend in and not stick out in a bad way.
So being a respectful and mindful traveler, what are some things we can do to make sure we're doing that?
Well, it says to do your research before you go.
Yeah.
Really learn about the local customs so you don't accidentally do something offensive.
That's smart. I know I've definitely made some cultural blunders in my travels.
We all have. And it also reminds us to dress appropriately for the place we're visiting, like what might be okay in one place might not be okay in another.
Right. It's about showing respect for the local culture.
Exactly. Okay, let's talk about something that requires a lot of sensitivity. Interacting with people with disabilities.
Oh, yes, this is so important. What does the book say about disability etiquette?
Well, the first thing it stresses is using what's called people-first language. So instead of saying disabled person, you would say person with a disability.
Right. It's about putting the person first.
Exactly. And it gives examples like you would say a woman who has epilepsy instead of an epileptic. It's subtle, but it makes a big difference.
It really does. It's about using a respectful language. Does it give other advice on interacting with people with disabilities?
Oh, yeah. It gives a lot of practical tips. For example, if you're talking to someone who is blind, it suggests introducing yourself and anyone who's with you. Like, hi, Mr. Smith, it's Jane Doe, and I have Sarah Lee with me to your left.
That's really helpful.
It's all about being clear and considerate. Okay, next up, we have teaching kids about etiquette.
Oh, this is a big one. Passing on those good manners to the next generation.
Right. So what stuck out to you in that section?
Well, I think the main thing is that kids, they learn by watching us. So the best way to teach them good manners is to, model those behaviors ourselves.
Totally. It's like that saying, actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. And it also gives specific tips for teaching kids important skills like listening, not interrupting, speaking respectfully. Those are things that'll help them their whole lives.
Absolutely. Anything else stand out to you about teaching kids etiquette?
Yeah. It really stresses positive reinforcement, like praising them when they do something right instead of just pointing out their mistakes all the time.
I love that. It's about creating a good learning environment where kids feel supported.
Exactly. All right, last but not least, we have to talk about tipping.
Ah, yes. The world of tipping. It can be so confusing.
Okay, I need all the help I can get. What do I need to know?
Well, first, a fun fact.
Hmm.
The word tip is actually an acronym.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it stands for to ensure promptness.
I had no idea.
So it started as a way to, guarantee faster service.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Right, and now it's more about, acknowledging good service. But the amounts and everything, they've changed over time.
Yeah, I'm always second-guessing myself. Does the book have, specific amounts for different situations?
It does. It covers everything. Restaurant servers, bathroom attendants, coat check people, taxi drivers. It's super helpful.
It's like having a cheat sheet for tipping.
Right. And it helps you make sure you're being fair and respectful to the people who are serving you.
Exactly.
It's about appreciating good service.
Okay, wow. I feel like we just covered so much in this etiquette deep dive.
We did. Everything from the basics to really specific situations.
Before we started, I kind of thought of etiquette as this, stuffy, old-fashioned thing. But it's really not. It's actually super relevant.
I agree. It's like the secret code for making social situations go smoothly and being kind to each other.
Yeah. And in a world that can feel kind of chaotic and disconnected sometimes, it's more important than ever to, treat each other well.
Yeah, absolutely. Even little things like holding a door for someone, saying please and thank you, just being a good listener, those things matter.
They really do. They can make someone's day.
Okay, I have a question for you before we wrap up.
All right, hit me with it.
Since the book is all about how etiquette is always changing, what do you think are some etiquette rules that are, outdated, that maybe need to be updated for today's world?
Ooh, good question. Makes you think, huh? We'd love to hear what you think, too. Tell us on social media or leave a comment on the website.
And until next time.
And remember, it's all about winning. Winning with etiquette.
Exactly. So, speaking of winning, remember how the book has those specific tipping amounts for all sorts of, situations, like a little cheat sheet? Were there any that really stood out to you?
Hey, now that you mention it, one that I'm always kind of unsure about is those fancy hotel restrooms, the ones with the attendants and all that.
Yeah, those. It's like, do you tip? Do you not tip? How much?
Firstly.
Well, the book says if there's an attendant, offering towels and stuff, the typical tip is like 50 cents to $1. And if they do something extra, like, I don't know, help you with a stain or offer you hairspray, then an extra $1's a nice touch.
Makes sense. Like you're acknowledging that extra effort.
Speaking of specific scenarios, it also covers tipping for, checking your coat.
Oh, yeah, coat checks. What's the rule there?
Pretty simple. $1 per coat. And if you, manage to squeeze 2 coats onto one hanger, add another $1 for the second coat.
Got it. Okay, now, the one that probably comes up most often for most people, tipping at a restaurant. What's the book say about that?
All right, so for sit-down restaurants, it recommends between 17 and 20% of the bill before tax.
Okay, that's a decent range. Any tips on how to calculate that quickly, like when you're in the moment trying to figure it out?
Actually, yeah, the book has this cool trick. Use the sales tax as a guide. Just double the tax amount, and you'll be pretty close to a 16.5% tip.
Oh, that's brilliant. I'm totally going to use that.
Go for it. And remember, it's always better to be a little more generous,
Yeah.
especially if the service was amazing.
Absolutely. Now, what about takeout or delivery? Does the book have advice for those situations too?
Yep. For takeout, it suggests around 10%. And for delivery, it's more like 15 to 20%, especially if the delivery person had to deal with like bad weather or something.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Those delivery folks deserve a little extra, especially when they're out in the elements.
Exactly. It's funny, we were talking earlier about how etiquette is always evolving, and I was thinking about how much things have changed in the digital world.
Oh my gosh, use S. Online etiquette is a whole other ballgame. I mean, there's so many different platforms and ways to communicate now. Does the book get into any of that?
It does touch on some aspects, especially email etiquette.
Okay, that makes sense. Email's still a big part of life, both personally and professionally. So what are some of the big email etiquette tips you found?
But one of the main ones is to keep it professional, especially when you're emailing coworkers or clients. So like avoid slang or casual language, anything that could seem unprofessional.
So basically, treat an email like you're talking to the person in person.
Exactly. And it also reminds us to be careful about our grammar and spelling. Proofread, use spell check.
Those typos can sneak up on you.
They can.
Yeah.
But honestly, I feel like email's just the beginning when it comes to digital etiquette. There's so much more to it these days.
Oh, totally. It's like a whole new world of potential etiquette blunders out there.
Right. What do you think are some, like, essential social media etiquette tips? Just to make sure we're all navigating these online spaces respectfully.
That's a good question. I think the first one that comes to mind is think before you share.
Love it. What does that look like in practice, though?
I mean, really consider how your words might affect other people before you hit that post button. Like, could what you're saying be hurtful, offensive?
It's easy to forget that words have real power, even online.
Exactly. And another big one is being respectful of other people's privacy.
So true. How can we do that better online?
For starters, don't share personal stuff about someone else without their permission. It's not your story to tell, right?
Right. That's a good rule to live by. Anything else?
And be careful about tagging people in photos or posts, too. Always get their okay first, especially if it's something, potentially embarrassing or unflattering.
It's all about respecting people's boundaries, even online.
Absolutely. Another social media tip, try to avoid negativity.
Oh, for sure. Social media can get SO negative sometimes. It's easy to get sucked into those online arguments.
Instead of getting into those fights, try to focus on sharing positive and uplifting content, It'll make everyone's experience better.
Love that. It's like, be the change you want to see.
Exactly. Okay, one more social media tip that I think is super important. Be aware of what platform you're using.
Oh, good one. Different platforms have different vibes,
What might be totally fine on one platform could be like a big no-no on another.
For example, LinkedIn. That's
Yeah.
mainly for professional networking, so you probably shouldn't be sharing like personal rants or vacation pictures there.
Right. Keep it professional.
Right. Facebook and Instagram, they're more personal, but it's still important to be mindful of who you're sharing with, Don't post anything offensive or inappropriate.
It's a tough balance to strike sometimes.
It is. But with a little thoughtfulness, we can all do a better job of being respectful online. Okay, moving on from social media. I think video conferencing etiquette deserves a shout out.
Oh, absolutely. All those Zoom calls and virtual meetings, it's like a whole new world of etiquette challenges.
Right. And just like with regular meetings, there are some etiquette guidelines to keep in mind.
Okay, so what are the big ones for video calls?
Well, just like with in-person meetings, being on time is huge EE. Shows respect for everyone's time,
Yeah, nobody likes that person who's always late to the Zoom call.
And even though you're at home, it's still important to dress appropriately.
So what's your advice on video call attire?
It really depends on the meeting and the company culture. But I'd say, when in doubt, err on the side of professionalism. You don't have to be super formal, but avoid anything too casual or, revealing.
Right, like look presentable, but be comfy.
Exactly. Oh, and another thing, be mindful of your background.
Yes. Those Zoom background fails can be pretty funny, but also a bit distracting.
Choose a background that's clean, uncluttered, and professional. Or use a virtual background.
Yeah, virtual backgrounds are a lifesaver sometimes. Most video platforms have a bunch of options to choose from.
Exactly. Okay, moving on from the visual stuff, audio is super important too.
For sure. What are your audio etiquette tips for video calls?
Well, first of all, try to be somewhere quiet. No barking dogs or leaf blowers in the background.
Background noise is the worst.
And when you're not talking, mute yourself. That way, any random noises won't interrupt the meeting.
Great tip. And when you are talking, speak clearly. Make sure people can understand you.
It's all about being a respectful participant, just like you would be in a regular meeting. Okay, so we've covered a lot of etiquette do's and don'ts, but I want to go back to the why for a minute. The book really focuses on the fact that etiquette is about, building good relationships, right?
Totally. It's not just about rules for the sake of rules. It's about using those manners to make our interactions with people better, more positive. I love that. It's about making the world a nicer place.
Yeah, and those little acts of kindness can, spread. It creates a ripple effect of good vibes.
You know what? I just had a thought, something for our listeners to think about.
Oh, tell me.
We've talked so much about how etiquette can make our interactions with other people better, right? But I was thinking, how can practicing good etiquette actually benefit us personally? I feel like there's got to be something to that.
Ooh, interesting question. What do you think?
I think it has to do with self-respect and self-confidence. Like, when we practice good etiquette, we're kind of showing ourselves that we deserve to be treated well,
Hmm.
and that we can handle social situations with grace.
I love that. It's like etiquette is a form of self-care.
Whoa, I never thought about it that way.
Right. It's about taking care of our, social well-being.
I love that. It's like good manners are a gift you give to yourself and to others.
Exactly. And that
Right.
confidence that can really spread and affect all your relationships.
It's a win-win. Speaking of wins,
We did it.
we totally crushed this deep dive into the wild world of etiquette. It's been way more interesting than I even imagined.
I've got to say, it's been fun unpacking all these, timeless principles of good manners.
Before we started, I had this idea of etiquette being all stuffy and old-fashioned, but it's really not.
Not at all. It applies to pretty much everything.
Exactly. Even all those modern dilemmas we've been talking about, it's like, even though the world's changing so fast, there are still ways to, be kind and respectful to each other.
Totally. It's like etiquette gives us a roadmap for how to act in, any situation.
And it doesn't have to be complicated either. It can be as simple as, I don't know, holding a door open for someone, saying please and thank you, really listening when someone's talking.
Those small things can make a big difference.
They really can. Okay, so before we officially wrap up, I know you said you had one final thought for our listeners.
I do. We've talked a lot about how etiquette can, make our interactions with other people better. But how can it benefit you as personally?
Ooh, that's a good one. It makes you think.
Right. I think there's a real self-improvement aspect to it.
Totally. It's not just about being nice to other people. It's also about, how we show up in the world, how we present ourselves.
It's about being the best version of yourself.
I like that. And honestly, I think when you practice good etiquette, it gives you this sense of inner confidence.
Absolutely. It's like you're saying, hey, I deserve to be treated well, and I know how to handle myself in any situation.
Exactly. It's like etiquette is a form of self-care. Who knew?
It really is. It's about taking care of your social well-being.
I love that. So good manners, they're a gift you give yourself and everyone around you.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that brings us to the end of our etiquette extravaganza.
It does.
A big thank you to all our awesome listeners for joining us on this etiquette adventure. We hope you learned a thing or two and maybe even feel inspired to level up your own etiquette game.
Absolutely. No matter how much the world changes, remember,
Mm-hmm.
kindness and respect never go out of style.
And on that note, we'll see you next time. Keep those conversations going and
Stay classy.